We're going to continue with our series called Vibes. It's all about relationships, and we've done a lot. We've covered a lot of ground in the last few weeks. So quick recap. Several weeks ago, was that 3-4 weeks ago? I don't even remember now. Pastor Kurt came up. He kicked us off talking about parenting and the role that parents have in relationships as a whole. Week 2 was Pastor Justin and Lindsay Barnett. They came up and they talked about, somebody said, woo, all right. They talked about singleness and what that looks like and contentment. And they touched on loneliness and what that really kind of looks like in the context of relationships and the vibe of being single. And then last week, if you were here or you watched online, you saw Pastor Zach and Pastor Anna. They were up here and they talked about blended families and the dynamic that goes into that in a blended family relationship scenario. And so all of those are available on YouTube. You can go back and watch them all, check them all out if you want to get caught up to speed. But today, we are going to touch another relational dynamic that is marriage. Everybody say marriage. Okay, how many married couples in here? Okay, how many not married couples in here? It's all these people over here. It's all these people. Okay, so challenge today for you guys. One, stay awake. You know what happens if you fall asleep and I have a microphone, right? Everybody nod? You got it? Okay. Second thing, you can take notes because at some point in your life, you're going to use this, okay? Every married couple in here is going to walk out of here today with something, I hope, because the principles and the things that we're going to talk about are just universal. We will use them in the context today specifically about marriage and how we can handle some issues and working through things as a married couple, but you can use these and apply these really in a lot of different ways, universal truths to any type of relationship. And so let's jump right into it, babe. What do you think? You think we're going to get to this today?
Yeah, and let's just talk about the fact, you know how maybe if your mom or dad or mom and dad own a business and they just have that thing that they're really, really good at, it's their passion and they love doing it and they're just kind of an expert on it a little bit.
If they started a business doing it, then I hope so.
I kind of feel like that's where we are right now because this is Pastor Ivy and Benay's deal is marriage and they're really good at it. So no pressure at all. But I would say everything we've learned from them, kind of.
Pretty, yeah, I mean, for the most part, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, we've been with them for 12 years, so at least the last 12 years of their marriage we've watched firsthand and learned a lot from it. But so let me kind of preemptively say this. We're not by any means standing up here saying like, hey, we're marriage experts, not in any sense of the, you know, in no way are we saying that, because I have a kind of an odd theory, I guess, in my mind when it comes to experts. I don't ever really want to be an expert at anything. I know that's probably like, some people are like, well, why? Why wouldn't you want to be an expert at something? I just have this weird thing in me. I know it's weird, okay? When I say it, you're going to be like, that's not, I don't know. I just feel like when you get to the level of people calling you an expert, people tend to hit the brakes a little bit, or they just kind of take their foot off the gas and they just start to coast. And I don't ever want to be that guy. Like, I know she doesn't either. Like, I don't ever want to just coast with anything, so I don't want to be an expert. I want to always be learning and growing and getting better and just kind of pushing it forward all the time. And so, you know, that applies to everything, but today specifically, so I don't want you guys to think, hey, like, these guys are marriage experts. None of you were thinking that anyways, I'm sure. But if you were, stop, okay? Don't think that anymore, okay? So we're just learning and growing just like you guys are, and so we're going to share some things today that we've learned recently, things that we kind of knew and have practiced over 16 years, but really kind of put it all together just recently. And so we're gonna share that stuff with you today. It's going to be really good.
So before we open up, I want to ask you guys, all the married couples in here, so you can think on it for a minute, what is the hardest thing about marriage? All right, you got your answers up here. So I'm going to count. I saw Morgan look at Luke like, what is it? Like,
you guys have been married
3 weeks
3 days. What's the hardest
in?
thing so far?
I love it. So on 3, I want you guys to shout out what is the hardest thing about marriage. 1, 2, 3.
Choosing where we're going to go eat. That's true.
So good. I heard communication
Listen,
over here.
We can laugh about that. But the things that we're going to talk about for the next 30 minutes or so will help that situation. I promise you. It's going to help that situation. Somebody said communication. What else did you hear?
I heard communication is all
I heard communication
from this side.
and where we're going to go eat.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely help you guys solve those issues today, for sure. So
one of the hardest things for us over the last 16 years has been conflict, and it might have been several times where we were going to go eat. But before we get started, I want to go to God's Word and just read what He says about conflict. And in Matthew 18:15 it says, "If a fellow believer hurts you, go and tell him. Work it out between the two of you." And so in that moment, I want everybody to say, work it out.
work it out.
Go to them, have a conversation, work out. But more specifically, as it relates to marriage, Justin, how can we navigate conflict without causing more damage than what's already been done?
Well, that's what we're going to try to do today is hopefully establish something and share something with you guys that will give you something very practically or very practical that you can use in your lives and in your marriages and in your relationships that will help you not avoid conflict, right? How many of you think you can avoid conflict? Okay, nobody, right? We're gonna have some conflict at some point. A lot of times conflict is really good because it helps you grow, it helps you learn something that you didn't know. So we're gonna face conflict, we're gonna face some conversations and some issues that we gotta help resolve in our marriages and in our relationships. I think the key though is some of us, most of us, we face conflict and we don't come out better on the backside, or the situation doesn't get better, right? It just kind of either stays the same or gets worse. And so I think when we face any kind of issue, regardless of what it is in our lives, right? How many of us know, raise your hands if you feel this way, there's a right way to do everything. Anybody agree with that? Everything you'll ever face in your life, there's a right way to do that, right? Anybody agree? Okay. And how many of you also agree that we normally choose the other way, right? So there's a right way and then there's the other way, and that's the way that we usually pick. So today we're just going to talk about kind of a model, give you an idea of some things, and talk about the right way to do things. And so before we even jump into this and really get into it, there's one thing that we really have to touch on and really keep in mind. This is kind of like pre-point one. So this isn't even, point one yet. But before you can even get to the whole steps and the process of conflict resolution, you've got to make sure that you do this first, okay? You have to make sure that you're in the right time, the right place, and the right atmosphere, okay? How many of you know that if it's not the right time, the conversation's not going to go well? Anybody faced that before? Okay. Right now is not the right time and or place for someone to go and try to solve a conflict with somebody they may have in this room, correct? Like maybe before service, privately, sure. But like right in the middle of service, Colby would not be a good time. Whoa, not now, okay? You were making a move. I thought you were fixing to go solve an issue. Like not a good time to get up in the middle of service and go and address an issue with someone, okay? So time and place matter, atmosphere matter, all that stuff plays into it. So before you can even jump into the first step, you have to go, okay, is this the right time? Is this the right place? And is this the right atmosphere?
So when we're getting ready to go to work in the morning, and I've been letting these emotions build on me, and I've been upset about how much you've been on your phone, how much money, or I don't feel like I have enough money to spend. It's not the best time to bring those up when we're walking out the door going to work for the day. No, because you're gonna throw that on. This is a better example. We use this one at 9 o'clock. I think this one's much better. I don't know how many of y'all are facing this situation right now, but maybe somebody can relate. If you're getting ready to walk out the door to go to work, or it's at the end of the day and you're trying to go to sleep, or you're facing something, there's something like you're kind of in a time-sensitive situation, probably not the best time to propose that your mother-in-law move in, or a mother-in-law moves into your house, right? Yeah, that needs some time to
hey, by the way,
a little bit.
We need to talk about my mom's going to move in, but we'll talk about it later, and just take off out the door like you're going to work. Probably not the best time.
Because then all day our minds are running on that one thought, and you don't even know what the other one's thinking about it. You don't even know if they're like, this is not a good solution, but but I just had to bring it up because I told my mom I would talk to you about it, and then it's all day long for the enemy to be able to get in. And by the way, his mom texted me after we got out of first service and was like, hey, we need to move in. I was like, right.
I said, no, not a chance. Moving on. So maybe some of you guys can relate to this. Maybe some of you ladies can too. But this is a personal thing, anytime I face a problem or a situation in life, the first thing I kind of do is go, do I have the right tool for the job? Any guys relate to that? Like, okay, if you're getting ready to go out and grill burgers, what do you need? What are you going to flip them with? You got to have a spatula, right? You're not going to take like a spoon or a fork and try to flip your burgers with it, right? You got to have a spatula. If you're going to change out your car battery, the battery's dead, you got to change out your car battery, what do you need? A wrench, right? You're going to have something to get the cables off, all right? If you get a stain on your shoes, what do you need? You need a Tide-to-Go pin. You need to always have one of these, right? You just keep it with you. This is a tool that I always have with me because you never want to get a spot on your shoes and not be able to clean it, right? So.
Do you always carry that in your pocket? Because I had no idea.
I usually have this one, and then sometimes I have this one as a backup, and then there's one in the bottom of your purse that you don't know about, but it's there.
Good luck finding it.
Yeah, well, it's there. So we're talking about tools. What other tools, babe? What do you think?
So I have a really special tool, and this is something that you guys are very, very familiar with. You probably all love it a whole bunch, and we hope that after today you never think about it the same. And that tool is this piece or whole pizza, which at the end of the day you will be calling it marriage pizza for the rest of your life.
Everybody say marriage pizza. Marriage pizza. Okay, teenagers, none of you said it. Say marriage pizza. Okay, I hope you never, ever eat pizza and don't think about this, okay, for the rest of your life. This is going to be so helpful. You're all looking at me like I'm an idiot right now, but it's true. Okay, so what's the first thing that you do when you order the pizza? You order the pizza, okay, anybody got the apps you order pizza on? Raise your hands if you've got an app, okay? And you click submit or pay or order, and then what? Okay, maybe I'm the only one that watches the tracker. Oh, okay, everyone's like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it, I stumped you. So the first thing that comes up is like, immediately it's like, your pizza's in the oven. And you're like, it's in the oven. And you just sit and watch. You watch the little thing, it's not moving, but you're watching it. And then it moves a little bit, and it's like, it's headed to the car. It's in the car. You're like, hey, babe, pizza's on its way. Right? And then it a little bit more. And it's like, okay, the delivery driver will be there shortly. And all of a sudden, you're like, hey, it's almost time. The pizza's almost here, right? He'll be here in 3 minutes or whatever. You're tracking the thing the whole way. And what is that doing to us? It's building some expectations and some anticipation for the pizza, right? Because we are already tasting the pizza in our mind, are we not? Right. The closer it gets, you're like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so good. I got pepperoni and sausage and extra cheese and like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to like pull the first slice. And you know how super stretchy the cheese is, and it just keeps on stretching, and you're like, that's the sign of a good pizza, by the way, is when the cheese keeps stretching like that, right? Anybody? Y'all are all hungry now. Everybody's like starving, okay? But what you're doing is you have now this expectation. And so the very first step and the very first piece of conflict resolution in your marriage or in your relationships is that you have to have some sort of expectations, right? And so the very first thing is you got to expect the best. Right? When you get your pizza, it doesn't matter where you order your pizza from. Everybody in here, there's a whole bunch of people, and some of you will say Domino's. Some of us will say Pizza Hut. Some of you will say Papa John's or Marco's or the local place that, has a weird name that nobody can pronounce. And then nobody's really going to say Little Caesars, right? But maybe, okay? Did that shock you a little bit? She loves Little Caesars, I'm sure. So we have this expectation that builds, right? And all of a sudden now we're like, oh my gosh, this pizza is going to be so good, right? So good. So we have to expect the best. As we approach a conversation with our spouses, it's the same way. So we have to expect the best. And so just like we kind of prepare ourselves for the pizza, right? We have to prepare ourselves for some resolution to conflict, okay? And so the Bible gives us a couple of things that we can look at as how we can prepare ourselves, okay? If we're going to expect the best out of this conversation, out of resolving this conflict, whatever it may be, let's start right here, okay? So Matthew 7:5 says, first, acknowledge your own blind spots and deal with those first, okay? So you have to look at yourself and go, okay, what am I not seeing about me that could potentially keep this conflict resolution from happening? Like, what are the things that I'm ignoring about myself or that I'm choosing to pretend like don't exist, right? So what are my blind spots? The other side of that, Psalms 139 says, search me, God, know my heart, test me, and know my concerns. And then it says, see if there's any offensive way in me, and then lead me into the way everlasting is what it says, or the everlasting way. And so before you go into this conversation, you kind of have to just pause and go, okay, is there anything I'm not seeing? Is there anything in here that's not clean and pure? And okay, God, is there anything that I need to know about me before I walk into this situation or into this conflict resolution? Okay? And so as we do that, it's going to, more than likely, something's going to come up and we're going to be able to go, okay, I need to address that first so that I don't carry that into this conversation.
And I love how it says, see if there's any offensive way in me. And you may or may not have heard the pastors talk on this before when we said that offense is off the table. It was no more. I think they took a fire extinguisher one day and blew it off the table. Like, it cannot exist in the middle of this relationship when we're trying to have this conflict resolution. And so Justin did a really good job explaining to me at one point, because we love sports, and that's just how my mind works. And I was like, why do I keep getting offended, or why am I being offensive? Like, that's always the topic in conversation.
I used to say, why are you so defensive about that?
Mm-hmm. And so then that would cause confusion.
You thought it was, I was saying offensive, but I was really saying, why do you get so defensive about that?
So he gave me this great analogy. When you think about sports, when you're on offense and defense, you're attacking on both sides of the court or on both sides of the field. You're trying to either score or you're either trying to keep somebody from scoring. So in those moments, that's why God says, see if there's any offensive way in me, that we totally let our guards down. Because if we go into this conflict resolution with an agenda of, he did this, didn't do this, I did this, didn't do this, it just causes this attacking mode that happens. And so we don't have a great mindset, and we're not expecting the best to happen while we're in that phase of expecting the best. But once we're expecting the best, and we have a great mindset, then we're going to go into phase 2, which is identify the issue. So most people, first service caught me off guard a little bit, but most people, when they start to eat the pizza, they start from the middle where it's warm, it's comfortable, it's good. That's just the place that you start. So to identify the issue, we have to go to the center of the pizza.
Yeah, so let's jump into this marriage pizza thing. And so how many of you start from the middle? Like, your first bite is right on like where the pie is the middle. Anybody? Okay. How many people start with the crust? Okay. 2. All right. I was just curious, because first service, there was actually more people than that started with the crust. So it was kind of interesting. So this is, I'm going to put something up on the screen. The guys are going to throw it up there. And this is a model that we kind of used and changed and created using pizza. And so it's going to be interesting, right? Stay with us. This is going to help. But I'm going to walk you through this model of how to identify the issue, the real issue, okay? Because how many of us know we go into trying to resolve a conflict with somebody and we think we know the issue, right? We go into it and we're like, yeah, I know what the problem is. It's you. Exactly. Every time. Always them. But this is going to help us understand what the real issue is, okay? So if you look at the middle of the pizza, all right, we're going to start in the middle, just like you would eating the pizza, okay, except for some of the crust people, they start with the crust. But in this pizza, everybody starts in the middle. This is just the way that most of these conversations go, okay? So you're going to start in the middle, which is information obstacles. And what that looks like is facts, opinions, and perspectives, okay? So it's like this is the facts. Here's the facts that we know, okay? We're going to lay that out first. Why do we start there? Because that's the easiest, right? It's facts. And it's my opinion, and it's my perspective. So that's where I'm going to start every time. True? True, right? That's just where we start. That's the easiest. Like she said, it's the most comfortable, most soft, warmest place in the marriage pizza is my perspectives and my opinions. And so we're going to talk about the facts. We're going to get the facts straight. That's where we want to go first, okay? So that's the first layer. After that, we take a couple bites from there and we move out a little bit further, and you're looking at the environment obstacles. And so these are the things that really can be physical things about yourself. Could be like physical health maybe, or like your mental state, or maybe some emotional things. All that's kind of environment. Could be the physical environment that you're actually in, like the space. Could be that. Could be the people that are in the space with you. Could be the culture of the family, right? Could be the mood that you're currently in. A lot of these physical things, okay? And so the atmosphere is a key thing, because if you're noticing that like all your conflict, every time we have this same conversation, it's like we're always with the same person. Y'all feel me? Like that person's always there. So now you have to kind of go, okay, like we've identified that that person may not be the issue at all, but we've identified that our conflict only happens when we're with them. So now let's go a little deeper and figure out what the real issue is, right? So doesn't mean you're like going to go, okay, you can't be around us anymore because we have issues when you're here. That's not right? It's our issues to figure out. So we're just going to keep digging. And so we go, okay, maybe that person is always with us, or maybe it's when we're always at this place. Let's go a step further. And so then we jump into the next layer, which is the relationship obstacles. And these are the things between the two of you. Okay, these are the things in the relationship. So some examples of that could be like a lack of honor for the other person, or a lack of respect. Maybe you just don't honor and you don't respect them. And this is where it gets a little tougher, because now you've got to really, really be honest with yourself about it, right? You can lie about it and fake it and cover it up, and sure, but you're going to have more conflict later on because of that issue, right? So you've got to be real honest with yourself and go, okay, like, I understand it's a lack of honor, it's a lack of respect.
And I'll touch on that for just a second, because for a long time in our marriage, I would say that I honored JP. And it could look like it from the outside looking in, but then when we would go home, I did not always honor him. And if you're familiar with our core values here at the church, the virtues of honor are loyalty and submission. So I would say all day long, oh, I honor you, babe, I'm submitted to you, but do your actions really show that you are honoring them, that you are submitted to your husband, for the women in here? Because my actions were not proving and showing that I truly did honor you.
It was like in public, it showed in public, but in private, maybe not. So that's kind of the key, I think, is not necessarily do your just actions as a whole, but more so like when you're in private, does that match what you do in public and the person that you are in public? So some of the other relationship obstacles are ego or positional arrogance. I don't know if that's a thing, but I think I might have made that up. Positional arrogance. This is where we've all heard this. Somebody will say, I wear the pants in this relationship, or she wears the pants in this marriage. Those kinds of things. Everybody heard those? Okay, that's kind of what that is. That's like I'm gonna claim some authority, or I'm just gonna stake my claim as the boss, or that kind of thing. It could also be a generational thing. Maybe something happened in their, like, I don't know, maybe something happened with her mom that was passed down like generationally that she's working through and has no idea that's even there. Or maybe it's that there's some sort of like legacy event that happened in like, previous generations that has just been an ongoing thing in our family that we don't really even pay attention to because it's there, right? All of that plays into this. And then it's basically anything that kind of creates a gap between the two of you. Anything that creates a gap, okay? So that's what this whole section of the pie is about. So you've worked through, we got the information, we looked at the environment, we've addressed those issues there, any obstacles as far as what the things that are coming between us. And then this last piece is the hardest, right? You see where that is in the pizza? It's the crust, right? It's usually the toughest. By the time you get to it, it's not usually warm and gooey anymore. It's kind of starting to get a little tougher. And if you're a crust lover, like, okay. But in this pizza, this is the hardest piece to eat, okay? Because this is where you really have to go, okay, we've looked at the environment, we looked at our relationship. Now I'm gonna I gotta go back to where we started, right? Because obviously I've missed some things. We still haven't resolved the conflict. So now I have to look at my own personal values. What do I really value? Okay? If I say these are my core values, does my life show that? Do I really value those things? My IQ, maybe for some people, your IQ really does play into it a little bit. Maybe you just can't really comprehend and understand what's happening and what's going on between you two, right? And that's a real thing. It could be your emotional quotient or your EQ. It could just be the way that you handle your emotions, right? Your emotional awareness, all of that. It could be motives. It could be some experience that you had previously. It could be just self-esteem issues. All of that plays into, that's why the crust is the hard part. Because you've got to really do some deep digging and go, is it me that's creating this conflict?
So for the past several weeks, I would say probably 8 weeks, me and JP have been on this journey, and we've started working out together. We have a home gym. It's great. But there's been a new challenge as we've started working out together, and God has given him this special little gift to pull out greatness that's within somebody else. And it's crazy what's happened through workouts that's pulled out these experience and just self-esteem things that I had deeply rooted within me that has been brought to the surface. And so it's been really cool. So I like to adjust workouts when I work out. If there's something really tough in it.
She means cherry picking. Okay, that's what we call it. She likes to go, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do this because I like these. Right?
So the things that I like, okay, I'll do it. And it's hard stuff, but it's the things that I enjoy doing. So one day, burpees were in the workout. I think it was 5 sets of 25 or something.
Who knows what a burpee is? All right, we're going to do burpees right now. Everybody just stand up. No, I'm just kidding. Look, they're like, yeah, let's do them. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
So they're horrible. I hate them. I don't like them. And I'm like, can we please take the burpees out of the workout? Because this is 5 sets of 25 of them. So I'm thinking, I'm going to have to do these 5. That just blows my mind. And I just didn't want to do it. And he said, nope, it's written on the whiteboard. We're going to do it. And I was like, all right, we're going to do this. And he said in that moment, I really feel like God's going to speak to you through these burpees. And I'm like, you never spiritualize stuff. Ever. It's always, we're having the conversation and we're going to learn from it and move on. And I was like, I really believe God's going to speak to me through these burpees if you just said that. So I said, okay, here's what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do, because I can't keep up with him. But anyway, so I decided to do the burpees. I'm like, I'm going to do 5 sets of 5. If I can just get to 5, I'll breathe for 5 seconds, and then I'll do 5 more, and we'll push through it. And honestly, in that moment, God did speak to me in such a sweet, sweet way. I don't like being in uncomfortable situations. I do not like conflict, and I don't like conflict resolution, but I'm learning to do it because I know there's something great that's going to come on the other side of it. And so in that moment, I've learned that, hey, I may not like conflict resolution, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to set a plan like I did with the burpees. I'm going to do 5 sets of 5. I'm going to breathe for a minute. So in that moment, I was like, I can do hard things. I can have hard conversations that I don't necessarily like. I can take a deep breath and I can breathe through them. And I'm going to grow. I'm going to be stronger on the other side of it. So Moral of the story is God spoke to me through burpees, and I don't want to admit it, but it just is true. So that's just a little personal story, and so I hope that that encourages you as we finished up with point number 2, which is identify the issue. It wasn't the burpees. It was the fact that I don't like being uncomfortable. And so whatever that is for you, I pray that you will be able to press in and identify the issue as you go through life.
That's the thing about conflict as a whole, but really that's the thing about the pizza too, is like it's easy to start where it's the best and start where it's the most comfortable and it's the softest and the warmest. The longer you kind of let that pizza sit and you take a few bites and you start to enjoy it less and less, right? And it's kind of like pancakes. At first they're awesome, and by the end of it, you're sick of them. You hate them.
But that's good, and it does. It will get worse and worse the longer you let it sit. And a lot of us grew up in this environment and in this world where you just sweep things under the rug and you act like nothing ever happened and you keep moving on. Hey, everything's okay. Let's stuff it, move on. We're not going to deal with the conflict, and then we just press in. So now he gets the joys of taking 36 years of that, and through these workouts, like I'm not joking, there's probably been, over the past 2 months, there's probably been 3 or 4 times where we've had to stop our workout and talk through a seriously, deeply rooted issue that I've let just stuff and left build up inside of me for so long. So publicly, thank you for being patient with me. But we don't go into it with agenda, but the 3 things that you said at the very beginning, like the timing is right, the kids aren't running around, we don't have to be to work, like the environment's good, we enjoy being in the gym. So those are just little life moments that we've had recently.
Okay, so we talked about expecting the best, identify the issues, then what?
And then next we're going to close the gap. And when we close the gap, here are just a couple practical things that you can do. You can affirm each other and the relationship, and here's 2 things to do in that. To listen to each other attentively and carefully. And it's so beautiful because when we truly do listen to each other, when we look into each other's eyes, whether it's your spouse or single people, if it's somebody that you're in a friendship with or somebody you're working with at work, when you truly do listen to somebody, it just brings this level of intimacy and closeness into the relationship that is absolutely beautiful. Because I'm a planner, I'm a list maker, so I even have to be very, very careful that I do listen to him and that I'm very attentive when I listen to him, that I'm not scrolling on my phone, that we're having conversation and I'm looking into his eyes and really feeling what he's feeling, and vice versa. And a lot of the times when we talk about intimacy, we don't think about clothing yourself in anything at all, do we, married people?
Most of the time it's the opposite, I think, right?
But here's
real talk. Just saying.
Let's talk about what Colossians says,
okay,
which is real good. It's Colossians 3:12. It says, "You are always and dearly loved by God." And here's the kicker. Let's pause. The person that you're talking to, they are always and dearly loved by God. So robe yourself with virtues of God, since you have been divinely chosen to be holy. Be merciful as you endeavor to understand others, and be compassionate, showing kindness towards all. Be gentle and humble, unoffendable in your patience with others.
Yeah, so typically, especially I think as a young guy growing up, and the media does this, and movies and TV and music and everything now, it's kind of out of control a little bit. We automatically kind of assume that intimacy means something that has to do with sex. And that's just the correlation that honestly now I think probably females struggle with it just as much as men do. And so there's this thing in our minds that go, okay, like intimacy means sex. And that's not true, right? Intimacy just means a closeness, or there's like a deep like soul connection, right? More than just a physical thing. And so I want to talk about that just a minute, because Colossians really, if you just look at it and walk through it very slowly, it kind of disproves the whole thing that society says about intimacy, right? And so the very first thing it says is, hey, look, and this is specifically for men, women, y'all can listen too, but I'm talking to the guys right now. You are always and dearly loved by God. That's the first thing he says. And so as men, we have to know that intimacy with our wives is always going to suck if we don't understand that God loves us. We have to understand that first, because this is always going to suffer if we don't get that, okay? Conflict's always going to happen. I'm just telling you. Then it says, you are dearly loved by God. Robe yourself with virtues of God, since you have been divinely chosen to be holy. So we have to understand that God loves us. God chose us. Okay, we get those two right. And then it goes into how we should act. So the first two things are like, hey, you have to believe these things to be true. And then this is an action. It says, be merciful, be compassionate, show kindness, be gentle, be humble, be unoffendable, and be patient. So first we have to understand a couple of things about us. Then we can act a certain way, and there's where the intimacy begins to happen. See, the problem is that as men, most of us go, well, we're going to be intimate tonight. That just means that we're going to have sex with each other. And that's, in some men's mind, that's intimacy. But really, he's like, no. You need to understand that you need to be intimate with God first. You need to be close with him. And then here's how you should be intimate with your wife, okay? And so I just wanted to kind of share that really quick. We jump into, there's a couple different areas in the Bible where God really, really focuses on how to create intimacy, okay? And he just kind of talks about it all over the place. So like Genesis 2, Matthew 19, Ephesians 5, all kind of hit on this phrase. And I'm going to say the phrase that's in there, and then I'm going to try to explain it a little bit. The phrase is leave and cleave. Anybody ever heard that? Right? There's kind of in the very beginning in Genesis, he says, when you get married, you should leave your family, leave your mom and dad, okay? And it says leave and cleave. And so cleave is a weird word because it actually means two things that are opposites of one another. So it can be confusing. Anybody know what a meat cleaver is? Right? Raise your hand if you know what a meat cleaver is. Okay, that's the big square-looking butcher knife, What happens when the butcher hits that, piece of steak or whatever with that? It separates. It separates the flesh and blood, right? And so it cleaves. So when you get married, there's a cleaver that strikes and it cleaves. It cuts away the flesh and the blood. The thing is, though, is that those two pieces of steak, one of them doesn't change. They're both still pieces of steak. So while you might leave home and you might leave mom and dad, it doesn't mean that you're different as opposed to, you're still a part of that family, understand? So you're not saying, well, done with you guys, moving on, right? It's like we're still connected, we're still together, but now I'm separated and now I'm cleaving to my wife or I'm cleaving to my husband. So it actually means two things. It means like a complete union and it means a separation. So it's kind of a two-sided thing there. It's pretty unique. So he says leave and cleave, and then it says hold fast to. Okay, all three of those verses that I mentioned say that. And the reason that God kind of repeats himself over and over again and that other people in the Bible repeat the same thing is because God knew that the devil was going to do anything he could do to try to get between the husband and the wife. Okay? He understands from the very, very beginning of the story how important that union is to God. And so from the very beginning and to this day, he's doing all that he can to try to separate you and your spouse. And so when it says hold fast to, you have to make sure that nothing comes between the two of you, okay? There's nobody in this room right now that can come up here and pull me away from my wife, I promise you. Because guess what's going to happen? We're both going to fight. And we're not going to let you in between us, okay? And so what you need to know is that the devil can't come between you if he can't get between you. Okay? So we have to make sure, as we said, we got to close the gap. Okay? And so how do we do that? Very, very practical things. How we close the gap. You have to commit to each other and you have to hold on to your commitment. So if you are married, then you have already verbally and committed to that person. So you need to hold on to that commitment. Okay? This one is easy. Sometimes we kind of neglect it. You got to be best friends. That doesn't mean you can't have friends, but this is your best friend. It has to be, okay? It has to be. So you've got to be best friends. Then you have to always assume the best of your best friend. Right? You can't lean to the other side of things and doubting them all the time and thinking that they're up to something and just being skeptical. You always have to assume the best of your best friend. Okay? And then the last thing, this is where some of us will disagree and some of us will feel like, oh, he's calling me out on this or whatever. But this one is very, very important, okay? And I know there are going to be some dynamics in the room where maybe it's not possible right now. I get it, okay? But you have to, okay? Go to bed together. Go to bed together, okay? I've got too many friends and I've had too many people in my life that I've seen this happen to, and the husband will go to bed at 9 o'clock, but the wife will stay up on her phone on Facebook for 2 hours, okay? Or whatever, or the other way around. The wife will go to bed, she'll put the kids to bed, she'll go to bed, he'll stay up watching Netflix or on his computer or just doing whatever, right? Reading, and it's not always something bad or sketchy that's happening after that. But the point of the matter is that, remember, let's go back, rewind a little bit, take out anything that creates a gap, okay? If she chooses to go to bed at 9 o'clock and I'm not sleepy, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go lay in there and stare at the ceiling. Because if I stay up and I'm on my phone or I'm digging around or watching TV or whatever, all I've done is create a gap now where the enemy can slide in there, okay? There's a reason that if you look up stats and you look up teenagers and when they start looking at pornography, there's a reason that most of it happens after bedtime. The enemy knows, okay, the thief of the night, he knows when to attack and when to kind of, sneak in there. And do, like, it's no different when you're married, right? It's no different. Like, you think that those ads that pop up are just random ads. It's a plan. The enemy is coming after your marriage, okay? So we have to close the gap. You just have to make the decision to commit to each other, be best friends, always assume the best of your best friend, and then go to bed together. And if you want to eliminate all of the relationship obstacles, right? All the relationship obstacles that we face, you've got to close the gap. Okay, so we've talked about a couple of things. Give them a quick little recap, the big 3 points, and then we'll jump into the last one.
All right, so number 1 was expect the best. Number 2 is identify the issue. And then number 3, what he just covered, is close the gap. So lead us into 4.
Okay, so this is our last point. We're going to close it down here in a few minutes. Everybody's going to go eat pizza today. Okay. So we've talked about a couple of different things. We've talked about this process as we go through the marriage pizza. And so let me go back to this. How many of you guys just don't eat the crust? Like you just skip it? Anybody? Raise your hand, be proud. You're like, nope, I ain't got time for the crust. Okay. So how many of you like the crust? Let's do it this way. Keep your hands up because I'm going to ask a follow-up question. Okay, so a lot of crust people in the room. Okay, keep your hands up if you like the crust. Okay, now let's drop our hands if we're all about the stuffed crust and we're all about the seasoned crust with the cheese on it and all that. I want to talk to the people that like just the plain old crust, okay? Just nothing on it. Just give me the crust. Okay. All right. Just wondered about that. So I was like, stuffed crust don't count. That's like a whole nother piece of pizza, okay? So we don't even count that. But here's what happens a lot of times, okay? In real life, it's split. Some people like the pizza. Some people like the crust. Some people don't. In the marriage pizza, most of the time, nobody likes the crust. You know why? Because it's the hardest. It's the toughest, okay? It's a process and it's a grind to kind of get through it. And so you can do all the things right. You can expect the best, right? Your pizza is on the way. You expect the best. You can identify all of the issues. And by the way, it's real easy to point out issues, right? That's one of the easier pieces. You can definitely close the gap, right? You can do all the things to close the gap well. But there's one last thing that you have to do. You absolutely have to do, or you're just going to continue to repeat the process, okay? Anybody ever do this? This is a theory I have. I'm trying to figure out if it's true or not. Does anybody eat the pizza and then stop and not eat the crust because you think you want to save room to get more of the good stuff. Anybody do that? You're like, I'm just going to discard the crust. I'm not going to waste my time with that because if I don't eat the crust on this piece, then I can have all the good parts of this piece, right? Does anybody do this? Okay. I thought maybe that would be a random thing that popped in my head, but that's a real thing. And so in the marriage pizza, a lot of people do that. And so what happens is we go through the process, and then we get to the crust, and we throw it off to the side, and then we just repeat the good parts again. We just repeat the stuff that we like. We're like, we don't have time for the crust. It's kind of bland. There's not a lot of flavor there. It's not real fun to eat. So we're not going to do that. So we just kind of repeat the process over and over again, and we never get to the end of it. We quit early. We're just like, the crust. One of the most important parts of this pizza is you have to expect the best, for sure. You have to go into it with a great mindset. You have to identify the issues. You definitely have to close the gap, but then at the end, you have to eat the crust. Everybody say, eat the crust. You have to eat the crust, because in the marriage pizza, the crust is where the victory is. The crust is the sweetest layer of the marriage pizza. It's the piece of the pizza that's the most beneficial to us. It provides the most growth. It tastes the best. It's just all around, it's the best place. But we tend to cut ourselves off from that because we think it's hard. We think it's tough, right? And in the marriage pizza, the crust is made up of a couple cool ingredients, right? Forgiveness, and then it's seasoned with a little bit of generosity. And so, babe, talk to him about forgiveness, and then I'll touch on the last piece.
So to start this off, I want to see what Colossians 3:13 says. It says, tolerate the weaknesses of those in the family, forgiving one another in the same way that you have been graciously forgiven by Jesus Christ. If you find fault with someone, release this same gift of forgiveness to them. Because when it's all said and done, if you can't forgive the one for the other conflict, you'll never be able to prevent conflict in the future. You're going to keep going through this same crazy cycle over and over and over. And for so many years, I was stuck in unforgiveness. Unforgiveness for things that he did before I even met him. Things that he did before we got engaged. Things before he did before we were married. And I allowed that to travel and take control. He said the enemy's so slick. How he controlled our marriage for years. And I can think on days that I wasted being jealous, accusing, doubting him, not trusting him. All because of things that I didn't even experience in my life. It's just old baggage. And in those moments, I chose to partner with a lie other than to believe the promise. And when we partner with a lie, we're going to forfeit the promise. I think about all the times that I wasted with him just believing a lie. And those are all things from the enemy. And so I had to come to a place and I had to truly forgive him for things that I felt like had hurt me. But then even going past forgiveness, I had to consistently renew my mind. Romans 12:2 says to renew your mind. That's when you'll receive true transformation. And so I wish I could say to you, I forgave him and we moved on and lived happily ever after. But it's not always like that. The lies keep coming, but the more you keep replacing it with God's truth and his word and stepping into the promise and speaking the promises, because we have to remember we have the power of life and death in our tongue. If we don't stop speaking death, if we don't stop speaking the lie, eventually it's going to become our life. And I know that you guys don't want that for your life. I didn't want that for my life. And there was a day where I was praying the Lord's Prayer, and I was just bebopping through it and was like, Father, forgive me, for I've sinned against you, and I pray that you will, let me rewind for a second. Forgive me of my sins as I forgive those who've sinned against me. Think about that for a second. What am I still holding over his head that doesn't even matter? We've got to renew our mind. And I came to this sweet, sweet place several years ago. Pastor Renee said, you have to get to a place where you are trusting God more than you're trusting him. God is your protector. God is your defender. He's your comforter. And when we have that intimacy with God, just like JP said earlier, when we have that intimacy with God, this intimacy is going to go to a whole new level, and it's absolutely beautiful.
So in the crust of the marriage pizza is forgiveness. But then there's also another ingredient that I mentioned, and Philippians 2 kind of shows us a little bit of this. It says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. And so if you just kind of stand back and look at that, like, that's what generosity really is. Generosity isn't, hey, I'm going to give some money to somebody. That's what we tend to think, but if you really think about it a little bit and you kind of just big picture, generosity is putting the needs and the specific things that somebody else needs above yourself, and like you put them first, right? That's what generosity really is. It could be money, but it could also just be attention. It could just be the skill of listening, right? It could be investing some encouragement into somebody. It could be anything that you're going, you know what? Instead of just holding on to this or like asking for something for me, I'm going to give it to that person, right? So anybody ever found a solution to conflict by being selfish? Okay, 0 for 2 today. I was wondering. I used to be, like, I'm just going to be real with you guys. I used to be one of the most selfish people that you could possibly meet. I don't know where it started. I don't know what caused it. I don't know, but they're just at a point in my life, I just got to the point where I was kind of just like, whatever. If it doesn't benefit me, I don't care. I'm not doing it. If it benefits me, then I'll entertain it. And if it really benefits me, then I'm all in, right? So it was just kind of this thing. It was like, it didn't matter what it was. If I could gain something from it, I was okay with it, right? And I didn't really care about how it affected other people. But there came a time where I just got to the point, and this is long before the marriage pizza, this is long before any of this stuff. I just got to the point where I was like, I don't know, it just you kind of get to that point where just like this just isn't working anymore. Like something's just not right. And I just decided in my mind, like, I'm just going to do whatever I can. I'm just going to test it, you know. God says to test him. I'm going to test him and just see what he does. I'm going to put her first, and I'm just going to start doing things for her before I do them for myself, and just see what happens. And let's rewind. Let's go back to the intimacy piece, because that's where it really changed, I think, for us on an emotional, like mental, and just kind of a soul level. Was like she began to feel valued because I put her first. And then at the end of the day, like, I wasn't out to gain anything, but I gained more from it, and so did she. So it was just like, it was kind of like just this no-brainer then. It was like, okay, I'm just going to begin to, I'm done being selfish. This is stupid. And so generosity is the second piece of that crust piece that is super important. And here's why a lot of us don't get to that. A lot of times we have a conflict with family or with our spouses or whatever, and we never make it to the forgiveness piece. And we've all seen this situation, whether in a movie or in real life. Somebody gets to the end of their life, and you know, a family member standing there, and all of a sudden it's just like, oh my gosh, we have to eat the crust before you die. We've got to go through forgiveness. We've got to solve all these issues, right? Like, why do we want to wait? Right? Eating the crust is a tough, grueling process. It is. It's hard. That's why the crust is hard. It's a hard thing to do. But I can promise you this, and y'all know, like, you leave the pizza sitting there, the crust only gets harder, right? It's not getting any softer. It's not getting any easier to digest. You can try to microwave it, but it's 30 seconds later, it's going to be even harder than it was, right? So this is one of those things, like, the quicker you can eat the crust, the easier it's going to go down. So this whole, like, I'm going to wait and just ride it out and I might forgive you later kind of thing, like, we need to do our best to get through this and try to get to the crust as quick as possible. And so, expect the best, identify the issue, close the gap, and then finally eat the crust.